everyone. This is the Financial Drag Show. I'm one of the hosts. I'm Jessica Dawson. I have with me my best friend, Nicole Powers, and co-founder. And then we have one of our guest drag queens, that is Cora Holloway. And today we have a very, very special guest, Ann Winget. She is a venture capitalist, and she is going to be giving us a lot of information. And she has a book. We'll be talking about Pitch the Bitch here soon enough. But Kelly, how are you doing?
Amazing. It's an interesting winter day here in Texas with a bright, sunny 85 degrees today.
And how many drag queens have you talked to today yet?
Today, one,
Okay.
which is a low count, I think. If you don't know anything about Dallas, Texas, it actually has one of the best drag shows in the country at the Rose Room at S4.
I was
Cora, have
impressed.
you ever heard of that?
Oh, everyone's heard of the Rose
Okay,
Room.
good.
Yes. I was like, we got to get those numbers up for you though. Those are rookie numbers.
Back in my day, I did in fact live in the neighborhood. So I was at the drag show Monday night, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So now I live out in the boonies.
So
Now, have you ever personally
Dallas?
seen? Oh, go ahead, Jess.
Well, did you grow up in Dallas? Or
I did. Where's my arm? Here it is. Nope, other arm.
Oh,
So there's Dallas. Yes.
Yes.
So
I've been
how
in
long
Dallas,
have you
Texas
been-
once when I was in middle school. I was actually part of acting and modeling agency, and we flew to Dallas for an acting and modeling expo.
Was it Barbizon?
It was John Casablanca, but
Okay.
we had to fire them. And because of this expo, so we get there and no one was there to represent us. It was me and one other person. So other agencies were able to help us and navigate us there. Then we got to actually meet with the people after we did all the things that we had to do, monologue, walk, and everything. And I remember putting my resume with HBO, Showtime, whatever it is. And I stood in line for Disney. And I remember being the last person. They're like, this is the last kid that's going to talk to the rep. And we're like, okay, perfect. That's me. And Disney said to me, and I'll never forget it, we want to hire you. We want you for our shows. We want you for our channel. We want to work with you. So have your agency do this and this and this and this and send this. And we did everything that we were supposed to do. We paid all the money to do. The agency did nothing with it. So we had to fire them. So then I sat there growing up in the 90s going, that could have been my show.
you could have been the next
We let it
Britney
go.
Spears. You
Yeah.
missed out.
I don't know
I was
if you
like,
have watched the Midwestern film Drop Dead Gorgeous.
oh, yes.
And that whole movie with that whole thing is like 100% Barbizon, which was like the modeling pageant, whatever thing of like the 90s and early 2000s.
Are they
And
still around? Do they need a drag queen? Let me call them up.
no, but it was hilarious.
that was earlier? That was almost in the 80s and early 90s. I mean, I feel old now when you talk about that.
They used to pick up people at the malls.
Yes. So, Kelly, how long have you been doing or in the venture capital world or private equity world, if we're diving into the finance questions?
Yeah, so I've been in private equity. So I think that what's important is I think venture gets a lot of like fireworks and it's like really exciting. You like hear about all the venture firms that are getting started by all the celebrities, like Serena Williams starting her venture firm, and like it's just got a lot of popularity. But venture is actually a part of the private equity asset class, and private equity includes venture growth and buyout capital. And it's just like, what kind of capital are you investing into companies and at what stage? And so I think it's important for people to know that there's like a whole spectrum that is included when it comes to private equity, and venture is a piece of that. And I've been in the alt space, which is basically everything outside of stocks, bonds, and cash, traditional investment vehicles that like 99.9% of people are invested in, is this alternatives class. And that's pretty exclusive to high net worth, family office, institutional investors who can write $100 to $1 million checks But the reality is that if you have established yourself in your career, you make a little bit of money, you have a smaller net worth, you can actually be pretty creative when getting involved in alts. It includes everything from real estate to cryptocurrency.
So I've got a real interesting question. Where does everybody keep their money, these funds? Is it coming from a particular policy that I believe I know what it is called? And they borrow from that policy in order to fund most of their ventures?
So there's a couple different ways that people get capital to invest, and some of it is from their life insurance. When you get into a certain net worth, you can really start borrowing against the assets that you own. But most people who are in your ultra high net worth or your billion-dollar family offices,
Mhm.
they have a huge diversified portfolio. They own a lot of real estate, they own a lot of insurance, they own a lot of stock, and they own a lot of private equity. And they borrow against all these different assets to like invest in more stuff. A big piece of their strategy is also tax mitigation, right? Most people are paying 30 to 40% of their income to the US government to do nothing with. And if you can get really good at tax strategy, even you as a W-2 like employee, then you can add back 20 to 30% of your income for you to spend, invest, or save, right? And I think that people don't think about that enough. But most money right now, I mean, there's almost 7 trillion with a T, okay, sitting in money market accounts right now. Cash.
Wow.
Why are
I
they keeping it
wonder,
on money markets? Is everybody so nervous about the economy?
They're getting paid 5%.
And
So
they
why?
can't get any better anywhere else?
Oh, they can, but they don't know about it, right? The banks know about it. The institutionals that are using the money that's sitting in money market accounts
That's,
are making 10, 12, 15, 20%.
would you say that was the worst place to keep your money, other than your personal savings account?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not a financial advisor. I'm super biased about what you should be doing with your money.
We have to
Um,
say that every time. We're not financial advisors, so we don't
yeah.
recommend stuff. This is, we know
I
finance.
still haven't gotten past when you said celebrities opening venture funds, and I was just thinking this whole time, where would Mama Rue put her money? And if RuPaul started a fund, would it be called Work Capital?
Oh my
And
God, that would be amazing. And absolutely, they will have a family office
yeah,
investing.
I'm sure that they do. Cora,
Yes.
of those words, do you understand all of what we just talked about? Because I
For
was
the
lost
most
the entire
part.
time.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm familiar with some money, and I'm just
Yeah.
sitting here wondering, do those people that had the money in the account need a sugar baby? Because I am available. You got trillions of money in a bank account. Sign me up, girl.
Cora, do you have I take it you have a different job other than doing drag?
Yeah, I'm actually a server. I work for Disney, so I'm at Disney Springs and a location inside Disney. So I work about 4 to 5 days a week, and then I take days off to do drag. So like when you see me on the shows here, when you see me at my home bar at the Wheelhouse, I take those days off. So then I'm kind of balancing kind of 3 jobs while maintaining also my own bank account. I try to keep goals where I'm not falling below, and then like, okay, once I reach this next 5,000 marker, then I'm not going to go below that type of thing. So it's funny because I'm really good at like budgeting my money so that I'm able to spend it on drag and able to take trips still. So I'm excited to be part of this too, so I can learn how to keep saving that money and how to like profit. I have a lot of friends that do a lot of the stocks at work and everything, and I'm just like, I'm always listening in, like, okay, that's a grand scheme. That's a longer scheme. You put in the money and it's a risk. It's a risk to take into stocks and see if that money will actually grow, and it won't be until it's long term. So
Yeah.
it's very exciting to see like what moves to make with money so that you can build or invest.
And I want to
Uh,
let the viewers know that Cora was one of our first ever Fisk tipping ambassadors.
Nice.
But I feel like money putting into drag is almost like an investment, for you to find bigger gigs and better opportunities with drag. So investing in yourself.
You're writing these expenses off.
That is the question, because one of the things that I wanted to do this past year was start an LLC for my drag. But then I don't know what the benefits are still of getting an LLC and how much the cost into it and what I would get back. Can I get that back in taxes? Things like that. So it's like a fine line, like, well, since, you know, I get paid not necessarily by W-2 standards, how can I utilize my drag career to get a financial return when it comes to like taxes and things like that without owing money because I don't have a W-2?
Right. So if you're going to set up yourself as a business, which you should, right? The United States hates people, but they love businesses. So you don't want to be a person. You want to be a business. And as quickly as possible, it's the fastest way to build wealth. Because if you set yourself up correctly, there's a couple different options. You can be a single member LLC, and you can do it through your personal return, especially if you have a W-2 job too. You can just attach it to that and take your deductions on your consulting work, drag work. Or you can set it up as an S corp and cap yourself at a 20% tax. So it's, and that's on the income that you earn beyond your expenses. Now, the thing that people don't understand, they're like, oh, I just set up an LLC and write off my life, right? That's fine, except for the IRS is like, why would you continue to have a business that loses money? And that's where the red flags get popped up. And that's why they've created this new thing where you have to like register all your other information. And like, if you don't do it, they're going to charge you $500 a day up to $10,000, because they had all these businesses start in COVID where people were like, oh, I'm just going to write off all this stuff and get all these tax incentives and all this sort of stuff. But they don't understand, like, the IRS is not stupid. They're lazy and underfunded. And so when it comes to like red flags, the easiest way to get audited is to like go to zero all the time. But it does help offset if you're spending money on your drag career, that you don't pay taxes on that income you make because you're spending it back into your business. And that's what they want you to take advantage of. So that I would encourage you that way if you're making a substantial amount of money doing drag at this point. Even if you're doing over 10 grand a year, I don't know what are you making a year doing drag?
You know what? As a queen, it's especially here in Orlando, Florida, drag is very saturated. So it's
Mhm.
hard to find those locations because those people want you to invest in more hair, more jewels, more outfits before they even consider putting you in the show. And
Yeah.
then you go to the show and you may not even get paid. You know, so like I go to the one show that I'm on cast with, and we get paid by a bar tab that we can have. So we don't actually get paid. It's just the tips that you get from those guests. But then I turn around and then buy, you know, a $250 dress, then I'm putting in all the tips I just made plus some my own money into
Mhm.
it. So with drag, you rarely see a return or a profit because you're always investing into something else. And 9 times out of 10, you're just never going to make that money back unless you get on a reality TV show, then you might. But
And another thing that I'll and maybe we can talk about it offline, is actually people are really craving experiences, which is like your comment about like if the $7 trillion like want to come have a sugar baby, the those people have money parked because they don't know what to do with it. But people are willing to spend more on experiences. And there's a lot of opportunities to take your talent in other places where people may or may not understand, like, oh, I actually want to be a part of this. And one of the suggestions is that I had a friend that during COVID take their drag, because they weren't doing drag shows and they lived in San Francisco. This world shut down, right? So they took their whole show online and started doing drag bingo.
Yeah.
And so like bachelorette parties were like signing up for drag bingo on Zoom, and they would have like a drag queen come into their living room, like on screen, and do a show in their living room. So you have a lot of flexibility because you own your art, right? And how else can you sell that art to people that are looking for it?
that's also one of the things that I'm focusing on this year too. And I think I was telling Jess about that as well, where it's like I've learned that I can put in the work and show the videos and showcase my talent online, but people's not knocking on my door because they book their friends or book people they already know, you know, whatever it is. I said, instead of sitting around here waiting for Orlando Queens to contact me to be like, hey, will you perform at Southern Nights? I'm gonna go find my own venue and find someone that wants to invest in a show and pay me. Instead of waiting around for someone else, maybe I'm gonna go make my own show somewhere else.
Yes, exactly. Do it.
Cora, I have to ask a question. Since you're a server and you are a performer, are you investing any money into your future in any way? Or do they have a retirement at the restaurant that you have?
So they do, but and I used to work for Universal Studios, which did all that as well. Since I'm part-time for both, my husband mainly is full-time at his job, so that also helps with like insurance and things like that. But since I am really good with money, I need to put more back so that they are giving back in those kind of manners as well. But I tend to hold my cards close to my chest recently and just keep my money in my account to build it. So like recently after COVID, we were renting this house that we're in now. And with my husband and I, we're like, all right, we want to eventually save up and buy a house. So what are we going to do? What is there to do? You just put the money aside. Well, then right after COVID, they're like, hey, just so you know, we're not going to renew your lease anymore because we don't want renters in the community anymore. We want home buyers. So that meant going, okay, I guess we're just gonna buy. How much is it? And they said 55,000. I said, well, that's not a lot for a manufactured home, but I said, I don't think it's worth 55,000. And I learned very early on, they said, well, if you don't pay 55,000 for it, somebody will. And so I said, okay, in order, and I see this a lot in the real estate world too, where they buy homes and then like say flip it, or like they say that you have to purchase 3 homes before you get to your dream home. I'm like, okay, so I bought it for 55. If I do the full 20 years, which I won't here, then I'll end up paying about 110 on it. But I know that when I go to sell it, living right next to Disney in a gated community, I could probably put the price tag of at least 110,000 on it, and someone will most likely pay that.
You could do an Airbnb with it. A lot of
Yeah.
people are doing that.
Yeah.
Well, Cora, I've talked to you a little bit about the application and how it's set up to split your tips into a long-term investment account, potentially a Roth IRA or something else. That's why, Nicole and I have been working so hard, because we know that all the performers normally don't think about putting the money away.
Mhm.
So, my late partner they did bingo at Hamburger Mary's over here in downtown Orlando, and Gidget galore, Gidget.
Oh, yes.
And I thought it was incredible for the amount of time that they were there. Sam used to say he got tired of putting the makeup on, but once it was on, he had fun. And I thought it was just cash, and then they had to carry a wad of cash out to the bank. And Nicole and I have it, we think that taking that cash to the bartender and they send it right through the application to you, it's you don't even have to go to the bank anymore.
Right.
That's the overall goal.
Yeah, that's something. Working at restaurants, especially at Disney, we have a lot of buyouts. So you see a lot of companies spend lots of money to buy out the entire restaurant or floor, book certain food or entertainment. And I'm starting to look at those companies while I'm working on the top floor, like, okay, what company is that? Who are they? What are they doing? And then I also see like the advertisement that they have, and they had one of those banners that popped up, and I said that would be great if it was a picture of me and then like my name and then the Fist mobile app like QR code that they can just scan it and tip me, and I just take that to a bunch of shows.
It's exactly what it's designed to do. You have your own personal QR code, and it goes to you all the time. It was designed for everyone to use and just to generate wealth. Now, Kelly, we've talked to Kelly a few times, and there's always the question that we ask her, what do you need to see as far as pitching goes? Do you know what pitching is, Cora?
Yeah, well, like when you pitch like an idea and you're like talking about something to try and get that investment.
That's where Kelly has this awesome book, Pitch the Bitch. As soon as it came out, I got it, and I know she was on a book tour. And I was fascinated
Congrats.
because
Thank you.
she is one of the people. I know she has a few friends that invest in women. Because I don't know if you know, Cora, that only 2% of the funding goes to women, and it's people like Kelly that are on the lookout for interesting products to bring to market and invest in women.
Yeah,
Oh.
that's where I wanted to change the conversation to, Kelly, is like, being in your space, what is the landscape look like for LGBTQ founders, and maybe LGBTQ women founders, especially pitching to people, because, you know, I can tell personally from Jess and I experience that, like when we're on a Zoom call or in a meeting with a couple old white guys, you know, the whole time I feel like they're thinking like, are these two like, you know, transgender women like really like I feel like we can't get out of that headspace to a lot of different investors, and it's hard. But what are you seeing out there in the landscape for these kind of founders?
Yeah, well, the reality is that they are confused internally about what they're experiencing on the call
Yeah.
with you. And that's about as PC as I'll get with that comment. The landscape for LGBTQ plus founders is really bad. Like women achieved over 2% of funding, but only because it was
With the man.
solely female, with also counting woman-led with male co-founders. So and that's the biggest thing about data, and for like the listeners and everything, is like bad data in is bad data out. And right now we're still getting bad data where it is still all very convoluted. There's not a lot of like open data about who is openly queer in whatever way, because a lot of people don't feel comfortable sharing that information because of the unconscious or conscious bias.
There's some
And
things going
Yeah,
on.
Jessica and I like literally toss around the idea like, hey, let's drag it up and just be two men in a meeting one day and see how that goes.
yes,
And I was like, I'm all for it, Jessica. Like, you know, you know,
undercover boss it, like undercover boss
no,
it, film
but
it, like
isn't that
yeah.
crazy? It's an idea that we have to throw out. Like, it's like, because sometimes we're just throwing up our hands like, why is nobody listening to us? Well, we're a couple
I don't
trans.
think the idea is that crazy though, because I mean,
I don't.
unfortunately, it's the country that we live in that women work twice, 3 times as harder as men to get any opportunities. I mean, just look at pay rates throughout the years and opportunities. Like it's just unfortunately the world that we live in, and it's not gonna end anytime soon. So we just got to keep making those fronts and keep working that hard to
Yeah.
overcome any obstacles they throw in our way.
I think I literally, if you do this, which would be really interesting to see the response, is
Yeah.
like for you to record those pitches as like Jess and Nick,
Yeah.
right? And so
James
like
and Nico.
yeah, Jane, yeah,
I-
whatever. And do it, because the thing is that I had a conversation with a CEO that was leaving a company after one that she had started 10 years ago, but started it as a man, was leaving as a woman.
Hmm.
And the transition between like the experience she was having and why she was leaving the company that she started, she was like, I never had a problem. She's raised tens of millions of dollars for her business as a man. And just in the last 2 years through her transition, she was like, I went from leading boardrooms to not even being able to break a meeting for lunch without being run over by somebody else in the room.
It's crazy.
And she's the CEO
Jessica,
of
remember we talked to that woman, Jessica, that same thing. She had transitioned during her time with that big battery company, and she was raising like
the same one.
One, yes. Small
It's the
world.
same
what's her name?
Yes.
What's her name?
Charlotte.
Charlotte, yeah.
Charlotte, yeah, Charlotte Ham. Oh, I don't know if we can say her last name, but yeah, we got her entire rundown, and I was blown away. The whole time I was thinking, I was like, I wonder if it's the same person.
Yes, it is. And
Wow.
I was like, that's what needs to be like. And I don't know when or if she wants to ever share her story. I think she should.
She should.
You know, maybe another life she'll write a book or something. She doesn't know what she's doing next. But I was like, that, like, I am really good at code switching, right? I have long blonde hair. Like I'm generally pretty feminine, and I just look, I come from 5 generations of oil and gas. So I just look like all these good old country boys' granddaughters. And so I'm able to go into those rooms and they'll never know what I'm doing in my personal life at all.
That's what
Um,
you're under.
So it's for me, my experience raising capital and like being a thought leader in this space is very different than somebody that may identify more in one direction or the other. And
Yeah.
it's an interesting thing to like hear the feedback from other colleagues that are raising funds that are like, I haven't been able to do this, that, and the other thing. I'm like, I am living in a whole different world.
Well,
And
that's
it's hard.
you know, with our application and our financial model that we've created, the way it looks, it would explode because of all the servers and all the people and the generations. And then you go, well, what do you do with that money? And you figure out so many things that you're like, well, we could just put it right back into the community and start just. It's a unlimited supply of funds for the LGBTQ to invest in each other, and that's where giving back to the community would be epic.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I mean, I feel like trans women, we're not asking for 50% of the funds, but at least 1% would be great.
Anything, any amount. It's really bad, and especially for like BIPOC solo founders are probably the worst. But again, the data is not there, so there aren't a lot of it's all self-reported. So unless there are
Yeah.
more trans people reporting their success or failures in capital raising or investment dollars, we'll never know. And until it's a safe place for people to share that information to the financial world, like we're not going to progress in any way. And it's not a safe place, unfortunately.
we talk a lot of times to potential partners who would link up their company, from the investment firm. And once we have someone come in with the Series 7 or 63, we will be able to get referrals. But then they go back, we'll come back and talk to you, and they're like, no, we're not interested. And we're like, is it they getting all the guys together? And they're going, we can't deal with that. And I had someone in private equity the day that we talked to Liz say, the guys aren't going to do anything because of the drama going on right now. And we're like, oh, are we dead? Are we dead in the water? And that's where we probably have to have a 0.5% chance from day one to get funding.
I'm curious to know if you did a social experiment like that and filmed it, where you went, and then pulled the trigger and then did the transformation and went as men, or had men go in and pitch the same, idea to the same company. That would also put you on the map too, via social media or even the news. That is a social experiment that, could benefit Fisk as well.
Well, that's one reason why I created Double Nickel Productions, is to do a show like this. And we have how to create a fintech. And then we have another one that is coming up that we look like it could be something similar to Shark Tank with a twist. And we don't want to release exactly how that works, but Kelly, we do know that it would be mobile and it would be able to go from city to city. And I floated the idea around a few times, and everybody's like, you could get money for that right now. And so.
Well,
Yeah,
Shark Tank.
Oh, go ahead.
Shark Tank's about to lose Cuban, right? Which is everybody's favorite shark, other than I think Lori and Barbara.
I only watch for Mark, so.
Yeah, everyone watches for Mark because he's great,
Yeah.
but he's got other shit going on.
I mean,
And
he
so-
only owns the Mavericks, and I
He's
mean that's two full-time jobs right there, owning the Mavericks. But
he just made a clean $3 billion on that. He's gonna go do something else.
sure, that's
But I think that if you film that's like a 60-minute type thing, and I'm serious.
yeah.
Well, we got done filming yesterday the documentary. When Nicole and I first started out on this venture, we knew that this application had the ramifications of altering the future of every person in the service-based industry, because they don't have a tool that does this.
Yeah.
And so, I have a movie producer, and that's the reason why I made a production company, to learn how to produce something. saw all the incredible equipment. And, you know, Nicole and I were sitting here recording a Zoom because she's in Savannah, and the documentaries will be able to be launched when the app's launched. It's going to get launched this year sometime.
I do want to say that for any trans founders watching or people from the community, it's like, don't, like, I feel like it's easy to say, I'm not going to do something because no one's going to back me. Like, don't do something because of that. Definitely do what you want to do. Cause like, and I feel like I've never been one to be like, oh, well, we're not successful because, you know, we're just too trans women. Like, that's not why. We're just not hitting the right eyes, or not, you know, like that. It's never the excuse. It's just like, it helps.
One
It
and two,
helps
you get
to,
the yes. I've got no's. I've heard we don't need a visionary. I'm like, dude, don't you understand that everything is out of somebody's head? You get called all kinds of crazy stuff on your travels, and you know, being around out Kelly at the few events that you've been in, it's the best atmosphere for that I experience.
Yeah, the women's events are, again, it goes back to like creating safe spaces, right? And I think
Yeah.
that women in general have experienced such insane things in their lives that they just don't create spaces that are necessarily, not that women can't be toxic, but like in corporate spaces try to be pretty inclusive. And no matter like how crazy you may or may not be, somebody there will connect with you. And we're a lot more collaborative, I think.
Yeah,
That
that's
even if it doesn't make sense for me, it doesn't mean that I'm going to slam doors in your face for no reason. And I think that that's the benefit of like encouraging more women to, one, manage funds, but be part of the decision-making process. So even if you have a small amount of money, and I think that this is why this is important with the app you're creating, is that it gives somebody the power, right, to make a decision that can impact somebody else's life and their own. Access to investment options. And you working at Disney, you know, should really explore your ability to own stock in the company and whatever their matching process is. Because if your company gives you some sort of free money, take it and take as much of it as possible.
yes.
Um,
Always get the company matching 401k and then roll it
Yeah.
over when you leave. Yeah, I got a question about funding. When someone does get approval by someone, how fast do they release funds, and do they release a large sum at one time, or they break it up in little pieces?
So it depends on what your relationship is with them. If they, and whatever the terms of your investment are. Now, lead investors who typically write larger checks and lead an investment round, they're going to determine your terms, and they're going to give you those terms, and you have to accept them or not. But they're typically not going to fund unless you accept their terms. And maybe
You
they'll,
have a lot of ground to stand on when you're on this side.
yeah.
I had a young guy, and I hope he's listening, from UCF, who asked a question about the LGBTQ entrepreneur area. He wanted to know, how do you protect yourself against someone who knows so much more about money than someone coming in out of college? And even
Yeah.
us, you know, we're still getting our feet wet. This is not, of course, everybody's going to see me for a lot because I'm having fun. How do you do that? How does someone like us manage?
It's always important to remember who's paying the person who's giving you advice. And that'll help you determine who you take advice from. So even your financial advisor, you know, if your financial advisor is getting paid by the insurance company to sell you that insurance product, that bank is getting paid by the bank to sell you a credit card, not to give you financial advice, not to open an account for you that's the best account for you. It's the best account that is going to give them whatever bonus for the month. And so you want to find people that are either nothing's free in life, but people that are motivated by different things, or that you have control of how that person is motivated. And it's hard when it comes to money, and I talk about private equity and venture in general being super predatory because they're the ones with all the money, right? So they make all the rules.
Yeah.
And um I try to remind founders that they're actually the ones with all the value, and they're only going to become rich if they make the right decision on which founder to bet on, right? So capital has value, but so does your business, and you need to have confidence in that. So if if you have any type of sense that maybe the deal isn't right, this is the important part about deciding what your numbers are before you go into conversations with investors. Because if you don't already decide that, like, in 10 years on the front of the Forbes magazine, I'm holding a check for $50 million, right, for my business that just IPO'd or whatever, then you can't go into a conversation with an investor and they're like, we'll give you a check for 30% of your company for $1 million. And it's like, you could take that $1 million, but you also just gave up 30% of your company that you know is going to be worth 50 million bucks one day. And I think it's important to make sure that you're going to those conversations with well-researched valuations in your head, because you're going to build that value. And don't let them take advantage of you, and be, hold your ground.
Do you have that one rule where you never take your first offer, or it's you're
Not,
looking well,
not necessarily. Like, I try to be really fair when I'm coming in as like first or only capital. Um, and it's because I want to keep the founders motivated. So like I've done deals where we do reverse equity. So like the better the milestone that they hit, the less equity we take. So the faster and bigger they grow their company, like we go from 49% owners down to like 30% owners. And we also build in clauses in there where they could buy us out at a 3x multiple.
I remember that happened. You were explaining that at the one conference, and I was like, "What?
Yeah.
What do you
Yeah.
think? Is your opinion about the crowd funds, and doing that before they come to see you?
Mhm.
Do you not like them?"
It depends on what kind of crowdfunding, like a start engine, or what's the other one? Kickstarter. Like those things, it's just a lot to maintain really small checks like that. But if you have like a known customer base, it would be helpful to start with like low cost subscriptions. Like getting a customer to actually pay for your service is going to go a million miles with an investor. If you can come to the table and be like, hey, we only have 100 customers, but like all 100 customers are paying $1. And we did this in X amount of time. And if we had a little bit of money for marketing, we could actually increase that. We surveyed them and they said they would pay $5 for this service. So if we can get to 10,000 users, then we can charge them all $5. That's an easier way to get customers as opposed to crowdfunding. You only
Right.
want to crowdfund if you're going to be like getting a lot of capital, and a little bit bigger checks, like maybe 500 to a couple $1,000s a person, as opposed to like 10 and $20 people that are like, we like your idea.
Well, we noticed that, we do have a crowd fund up and going, and we were pressing it really hard. But the minimum to come in on one of those things, you can adjust it, or set it.
Mhm.
And we were
Are you
comparing,
doing a CF?
Yeah, we are. We are. Yeah, we're attempting to raise 500 through CF and have a sidecar with $1 million, because 1.5 is still our number. But that's how we were organizing it this year.
Yeah, you can get creative with some of those. It's the Reg A offering, which is similar. It's just the limits. Because I'm coming in from a fund side, right? Not necessarily the business raising capital.
Yeah.
And I think that the fact that you guys are going the fund route instead, like a regulation raise, as opposed to an SPV or some other safe or whatever it is, because I think that a lot of founders really shoot themselves in the foot by staying small with safes. I hate safes.
Eek.
So I think it doesn't give a lot of protection for the investor. It doesn't give a lot of guidelines to the founder. And so I'm hoping that eventually the venture capital world will get a little bit more sophisticated and do, more convertible notes or something else. Straight equity. Like, I don't understand why they don't just sell equity in the company. Just value it.
When does someone, the conversations when you are talking with someone with private equity, how many times do you got to talk to them in order to get to that? And we're just curious because you haven't got through that door yet. And
Private equity is gonna, depending on which private equity firm you're looking at, and this is why people think that private equity is different than venture, because when we refer to private equity deals, it's going to be your growth capital and your buyout capital and your mergers and acquisition space. And the difference between the money that's moving around private equity and the money that's moving around venture, like venture's doing a couple $100 billion a year in transactions. Private equity is doing like $2 trillion in deals a year, which is ridiculous. And it's because they're taking those 300 billion that's doing in venture and paying $1 trillion for it, right? So they're looking at companies that are profiting somewhere between $3 and $50 million.
that's a lot of money. Cora, did you
Yeah.
think you'd be talking about this amount of money when you signed up to
Oh,
come?
I'm sitting here taking mental notes too. I'm like, okay, yes.
And I
It's
know
fascinating, isn't it?
we are coming up on time, and I know one of the clips that I'm gonna clip out is when you said just value it. Because
Yeah.
like a lot of times when you keep pushing that goalpost back further and further, like, are you just waiting for like Andreessen Horowitz to say it's worth 20 million? Like, why can't you just say it's worth
Yes.
20? I hate that. Like, just value it. And that's the most beautiful thing I've heard.
Yeah. And there's companies out there that do that, and it's not even that expensive. And they're all looking for a revenue thing, but there's companies that are doing their series A's and B's and stuff off of a made up number. And that's what got venture in
Yeah.
trouble the last few years anyways. It's like you have these inflated valuations that don't mean anything.
It's all a
When
guesstimate.
yeah, you could literally just be reasonable and put a price on it and sell the literal equity and make, like, for individual investors, especially in private equity, is it is a safer investment to own the actual equity than like the promise of future equity based on somebody else's opinion. Because if somebody else comes in for your formal round, um, and says it's actually worth 4 million, not 10 million, then you had all these people that came in under a different assumption, and no one wants to do that. But if you're making money, you have customers, just value your company and sell equity and decide what that equity is. You don't have to sell 49% of your company.
Yeah,
Sell
I love that.
Cool.
But Jessica, we are coming up on time. You
Yeah.
want to bring us out?
Yeah, I want to say thank you to Kelly. We're going to
Yeah,
talk
thank
to
you.
her off the camera because we've got more questions. We could probably have 2 episodes with Kelly. She has a lot, we do have a lot of other people coming on. We've got a wealth manager coming up next time. But we do thank you for reaching out from the great state of Texas. Guys, this is a Financial Drag Show with Kelly, Nicole, and Cora. Saying good night.